Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bitesize Cinema. I'm your host RJ McCready, and for this episode I'm going to be taking you guys back to a year in 1985 to look at the cult classic horror movie, the Italian horror movie from 1985. That's right guys, it's going to be Demons. So let's go and get the cinema tickets, let's have a look at the trailer, and I'll be back soon.
The preview you are about to watch is for a movie that is unlike any you have ever seen before. It is for a movie that goes beyond temporary fear to everlasting terror. It is a movie called Demons. Yes, the demons are coming, and they're coming for you. Warning. If you have the courage to see demons, sit near an exit. Otherwise, you might never get out. In your theater, who will survive the touch of the demons and who will not? Demons. With music by Billy Idol, Motley Crue, The Adventures, Rick Springfield, and Saxon. This is no dream. This is happening right now. It could be happening to you. Demons. They will make cemeteries their cathedrals, and the cities will be your tombs. Will you survive it? Demons.
And welcome back guys. So the synopsis for this film is a group of random people invited to a screening of a mysterious movie only to find themselves trapped in the theatre with ravenous demons. It's an R-rated film, it's got a 88-minute runtime, so it's a fairly short movie, and it's classed as a horror, and boy yeah is it classed as a horror. And it's probably one of the early horror movies I remember watching in my early teens. I remember we got it out from the video shop with my mates from school. And I only got up to the part where the girl transforms into the toilets and I ran out of the room scared and I couldn't watch anymore. And I didn't watch this film up until the last few years, believe it or not, being a fan of horror myself now. And it wasn't until I joined the Legion podcast network and talking to a few guys on social media, particularly Ricky Morgan, who I co-hosted on Dude Looks Like the 80s podcast, and he said, you know, you need to go and check this film out, and I did, and I really enjoyed it. And having a second watch of this movie, it's now one of my favourite horror movies, to the point where I'd even say, if someone said to me, oh Jay, I've never seen an 80s horror movie, and what could you recommend me? I'd say go and watch Demons. It's just got everything in it that you want, and which I'll go into in a minute, but it has. It's just it's a standout 80s horror movie, there's no denying that. So let's have a look at who made this film. So you've got some Italian royalty here, Italian horror royalty. You've got Lamberto Bava, who directed the film, and he is the son of Mario Bava, who is frequently referred to as the master of Italian horror, and he had a run of fantastic movies between the 50s and the 70s, which were low budget films, but they tended to have a recurring theme of imaginary concerning conflicts between illusion and reality and the destructive capacity of the human nature, which is something which I found on social media there, which kind of describes his work. And I suppose in comparison, when you look at all the films that he made, I mean, one of them was called Planet of the Vampires, just to say just one of them. He made, I think it was about 35 films in total, but not that I'm ever going to compare, say, like Hammer horror films to Italian, but I would say that what Hammer was doing on this side of the pond was what the Italians were doing, what Mario Bava was doing on that side of the pond at that time. So there was a lot of horror films being produced from Italy, and I never knew this up until, again, recently with, say, like Arrow Videos. Arrow Videos are releasing a lot of these movies now. They're doing an incredible job. Some of the artwork is fantastic, and it's really nice to revisit these old movies, and I know there's a lot of love on social media in particular now, so it's really good to see this resurgence of Italian horror films coming back. And also what I've noticed as well is there's an appreciation for these films, not only from horror fans but from movie fans in general, and these movies are now like a blueprint, and people are referring to these types of movies, and they're also getting remade now as well, which is good. So it's a good time to be a horror fan right now. And also not only Lamberto Bava being attached to this movie, you've also got Dario Argento, who is another part of the horror royalty. He did the screenplay for this film, and he has done a couple of horror movies, that's just to mention here: Deep Red, Suspiria, Inferno, Phenomenon, Tembra. I mean, that's just to name just a few, but there you go. That's a few of his films that he has directed. So again, he is a massive icon of horror, and I know there's lots of fans out there that love this guy. So yeah, he did the screenplay for this. So you've got a huge amount of talent attached to this movie, and then just put the icing on the cake. You've got a guy called Claudio Cimenti, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's an Italian progressive rock band artist. He's a keyboard player, and he's from the band Goblin, who did the soundtrack to Suspiria, and he's worked with Romero for Dawn of the Dead and one of Argento's movies, which I mentioned just a minute ago, called Deep Red. So he did the soundtrack to this movie. So like I say, that's just the icing on the cake for this movie. And now you've got the candles to go on that icing on the cake. Here you go. You see where I'm going here, guys. I'm just building this movie up. You've then got the killer soundtrack for this film to add to it, which is great. It's just random. You've got Billy Idol, White Wedding, Fast as a Shark, White Sect, which is a German heavy metal band. Everybody Up, Saxon, which is a English heavy metal band. Rick Springfield, and then Go West is in this film. You know, you've got Go West, We Close Our Eyes, which turns up in the middle part of this film, which I'll talk about later. So there you go, guys. You've got the base of the cake for the icing and the candles on the cake, and as a result of that, you've got demons. So that's a building block for making this movie great for me. And the other thing I want to mention before we talk about the film is you've got an actor called Michel Savoy. Sorry guys, I can't pronounce these names, I'm terrible at doing this. He's the guy who's at the metro station at the beginning, who gives the tickets out to everybody. And just to mention, he is a film director himself. He went to go and direct a film called The Church, which is... some people say it's the third instalment to this movie, the third unofficial Demons film, but he went on to go and make about 25 movies as a director, so he went on to go and have a successful career. And the other thing, just before I move on to review the film, the Metropole, the actual cinema in this movie, it's a real place, you can go visit it. I think they have horror conventions there annually, and it's in Berlin. And I've been to Berlin, I've been to the Metropole, I've been to the subway stations, visited all the locations and that. So if you happen to be in Berlin, go check it out. But if you find a silver demon mask, don't put it on, I don't recommend it. So just a little bit of advice from RJ, there you go. So let's have a look at this film, let's have a look at what this film's all about and the greatness of it. So the movie is starring Urbano Barberini as George, Natasha Hovey as Cheryl, Cole Zinni as Ken, Fior Argento as Hannah, and you've got Goretta as Rosemary, and the legendary, it gets mentioned a lot in this film for his iconic lines, "Hell, she's a friend of mine," is Bobby Rhodes as Tony the Pimp. So that's some of the cast, just to mention a few. So the film starts on the Berlin subway, and you've got an incredible soundtrack here. You've got the Demons theme, it's just great, go check it out. Actually, I think I'll post it on the page so you guys can have a listen to it. And you've got Cheryl, who is kind of like our main protagonist in this film, and she is offered 2 golden tickets from a masked man who's wearing like the half silver demon mask. He doesn't say anything, but he's handing out these tickets. And Cheryl goes to talk to her friend Kathy, who are on their way to like a nighttime college or something like that, and they decide to ditch college and go to the theatre. So they walk into the foyer, of the Metropole, and there's a motorcycle with a samurai sword, and when you look around the foyer you can see all these movie posters, and one of them being the Terminator, and you've got a poster for AC/DC as well in the background, so there's some Easter eggs in the foyer. And this is where they meet the other protagonists, being George and his friend Ken. And the other attendees of the screening include a blind man. That's right, it's a blind man, and this is meant as a ironic joke from Lamberto Brava. And a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and Tony the Pimp, who I mentioned earlier, is Bobby Rhodes, and he's along with his two ladies of the night, should I say. And then one of Tony's ladies, Rosemary, decides to have some fun wearing this silver demon mask, but as she takes it off she cuts herself, and then she walks into the cinema with everybody else, and they sit down to watch a violent and disturbing horror movie about 4 teenagers who decide to dig up the tomb of Nostradamus, who foresees that demons are going to take over the world. And you get quite a good it's like a movie within a film here that you're watching, and I've heard a lot of people say that they actually wouldn't mind watching this film that's on the screen. It actually looks like quite a good film. But one of the teenagers puts on a mask like Rosemary, and he cuts himself, and at this time Rosemary goes into the toilet, and then whilst the guy on the screen is transforming into a demon, she then turns into a demon herself in the toilet, which is an incredibly scary scene for me when I watched this in my early teens, as I said earlier. And then Rosemary's friend Carmen comes into the toilet to find that she's been transformed into a demon. She's got red eyes and all this horrible stuff coming out of her mouth, and she attacks Carmen. She gets scratched herself and she runs back into the cinema. And then as Carmen gets back into the cinema, she transforms herself, and there's a clever scene where someone's getting stabbed in the movie that everybody's watching on the screen, and as this happens the screen cuts and then Rosemary comes through, and then this is where everybody finds out in the cinema that Carmen has turned into a demon, and she transforms in front of everybody, and this is where you get that famous scene where Tony the Pimp goes, "Hell, she's a friend of mine." He's like running towards her, and then he realises what's going on. He's going, "What the hell?" And this is where you get total panic in the cinema. Everybody tries to run out, but one of the old guys who's, I've got to mention, he's celebrating his wedding anniversary with his wife, and it's quite funny. I've heard people mention this before about this film, where you take your wife to a horror movie with free tickets. So yeah, he's scoring some brownie points there, but he gets attacked, he gets scratched, and then everybody's trying to run out of the cinema. And what you need at this time when you're running out of a cinema, that's right, you need a soundtrack by the heavy metal band Saxon, as everybody's trying to get out. But all the doors are bricked up, which they must have used some fast activating cement to brick up the cinema here. So no one can get out. And because people are blocked in, they're now starting to get attacked by Carmen and Rosemary, and slowly people are starting to get infected, and the infection starts to multiply. And in an attempt to try and stop all this carnage and the infection and everything, Tony the Pimp thinks that watching the film is what's causing everybody to turn into demons. So he's thinking what's happening in the film is what's happening in reality. So he thinks if he stops the film, he might stop the carnage. So he goes into the projector room, stops it, but that doesn't work. So then he teams up with George and Cheryl. They kind of ally forces, and they barricade themselves on the balcony with a few other survivors. And then whilst all this is going on, that's right guys, while you've got the demon plague that's broken out, you then got a scene where you've got some punks in a car driving through the city, and they're playing Go West. That's right guys, you got Go West, We Close Our Eyes, just suddenly comes onto the screen. The most random 80s song you're ever going to hear in a horror movie. So then the punks make their way to the building, and they find themselves at the theatre, and they find a door that's opened up, and they explore the theatre only for one of them to get infected by a demon, but the door that they came through, one of the demons then escapes into the city. So with all this carnage going on, you get Tony the Pimp that gets transformed, the boyfriend and the girlfriend, they get taken out by the demon. There's a scene where they're sort of climbing through a ventilation shaft or something like that. You get a few scenes like that in this movie. So all in all, you're getting a countdown where more and more people are getting taken over by the demons, where then it ends up with only George and Cheryl remaining uninfected. And you get a couple of good scenes here where Cheryl's friend gets infected and you get a demon that comes out of her back. It's just some crazy special effects scenes in this movie. And I always say a film is only as good as its payoff with everything else that builds it up, and boy is the payoff good in this film. I mean, you've got George now, who then uses the motorcycle that was on display and the sword, and he comes chopping through the theatre with the heavy metal band music in the background, and he's riding over the auditorium, slicing up all the demons. He pretty much kills all of them. He's got Cheryl on the back, so he's proper taking care of everything. And what more do you need? What more do you need with a motorcycle, a samurai sword, taking out all the demons, the accept music in the background? That's right, guys, you've got a helicopter that comes through, crashing through the roof. That's right. So where this came from, I have no idea. And how a helicopter come through that roof, well, you just don't need to think about it. It's an 80s movie, it's an 80s horror movie, so I won't think about it too much, but it happens. It's almost like R.J. McCready's helicopter comes crashing through. So George uses this to his advantage. He uses a grappling hook from the helicopter to get out from the roof, and as they go up to the roof, they have one final fight with the guy who was selling the tickets at the beginning of the movie, and they managed to kill him by impaling his head on a piece of rebar steel, so they take him out. So then they are chased by a horde of demons out on the street, because everywhere else in the city has been taken over by the demon plague, and then they are picked up by a group of people on a jeep who are well armed up with guns and everything, and they manage to get out of the city. And then you get this final scene here where you get a few shots of Cheryl, and then she turns into a demon. It's like the sort of final twist at the end of it, and she's about to attack George, this little kid with a gun who's sitting on the back of the jeep. He's eating a sandwich and he sort of blows her head off, and she goes falling out onto the street. So it's got a little bit of a sting in its tail at the end of this movie, and you get Cheryl's body collapsed on the roadway. And then George is the only one who survived, and then he drives out the city with the survivalists. So that is the end of the movie. That is Demons. It's not a particularly long movie, but I don't think it has to be. It does everything it needs to. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm just purely entertained by this film. It's got some really good special effects, practical special effects. It's got a very, very good story. It runs at a pace. Some really good characters. Some memorable characters like Tony the Pimp. George plays a really good leading hero in this movie. And like I said, at the end you get a helicopter that comes through the roof. What more do you need? And a motorcycle that goes through the auditorium with Accepts in the background. And it's just good. It's a good fun horror movie from the 80s. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. So there you go, guys. That's my bite-sized review of Demons. So hope you enjoyed it. I will be back soon. I'm going to be covering the next episode is going to be The Black Hole from 1979. I think there's been a lot of buzz on the Facebook page about The Black Hole, so I thought I'd have a talk about that film and talk about its greatness and who put it together and how The Black Hole became about. So look forward to doing that. A little bit of admin for the show, guys. I am a proud member of Legion Podcast Network, so go check out all the other shows. And if you want to listen to the show, I'm available on iTunes, YouTube and Stitcher, and obviously Legion Network. You can find the show on there. So keep it bite-sized, guys, keep it fun, and I will see you soon.
If you enjoyed this show, then make sure you check out the other great shows on the Legion Podcast Network, like Cinema Psyops, Cinema Beef, Devour the Podcast, Duncan and Bo Come Correct, Exploding Heads Horror Movie Podcast, Friday the 13th, Get Slayed, The Hellming Power Hour, Hello, This is the Doom Show, Hero Hero Go Show, Kill the Cast, Underwater Kaiju from Outer Space, Jerry Hates Action, Legion After Dark, Mental Health, Obsessive Cinema, Discourse, Pick 6 Movies, the podcast by The Cemetery, the podcast on Haunted Hill, the Psychosemantic Podcast, Rick Radio, House of Wax, Dude Looks Like the 80s, Rabbit and Red Radio, the Shadecast, Short Bus Cinema, Two Drink Minimum Commentaries, The VD Clinic, Who Will Survive Horror Podcast, and Witch vs. the Doomsday Clock. With such a wide spread of shows, there is guaranteed to be a niche for you to fall in love with. Horror, politics, movies, books, sex, music, commentaries, health, video games, kaiju, action, news, comedy, and opinions that would most likely get you killed in some parts of the world. We are proud to bring you some of the best podcasting in the world. Check us out at www.legionpodcast.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other dark corner of the internet where podcasts can be found.